My name's Emma, and I've been working in the Burren National Park for about 24, 25 years. So any problems there, probably my fault. But we'll see what happens. So this is a talk about the national park. It's about what we do managing the park. So it's not in a huge amount of detail, but if you've any questions, just ask. And Helen Carty is here as well. She's from the Burren as well, or County Clare, National Parks and Wildlife. Sharon knows the area really well. And Lucy, you've been over, and Carly, you were over for. I don't know if any of the rest of you have been to the Burren before, but this will give you an idea. How do I just press that? Okay. Yeah, the Burren National Park. This is County Clare on the west coast of Ireland, so it's just the location of the park. This light green is the actual park. So it's a small area of the Burren itself. The park is only just 20,000 hectares. We're trying to grow it at the moment. We're purchasing a bit of land the last couple of years, and hopefully there's another big farm which we're going to purchase soon, which will extend the farm by another 500 or 600 hectares. So or acres, sorry. So that'll be great. There's differing numbers for the size of the park, because the geologists say, or the Burren, the geologists give it one area and the archaeologists give it another area and the botanists will give it another area. So kind of in around 360 square kilometres for the whole of the Burren, the whole limestone pavement area. So this is a topographic map. All these higher areas, this is the limestone pavement and the Burren. It also extends east into the flat, the lowland area over towards a place called Gort, but this is the main upland area, and it comes down along the coast a little bit. This is the boundary of the Burren National Park itself. So the main part of the national park is you've got Mullaghmore, Sleeverow and Knockons, three hills, and that's the main kind of chunk of the national park. And then you've got areas spreading out each side, and a couple of lakes and turlocks. As you can see, it's quite disjointed. There's outlying bits all around, which causes a bit of hassle for management, but we're trying to link them all up together. So in the national park, just staffing wise, we've a divisional manager, William Cormican. He covers East Galway and County Clare, so he's got a big area to cover. Regional manager, which is just for the national park, and then we have district conservation officer, again just for the Burren National Park. And then within the park we've got 3 rangers. I think some of you might have met Eamon. He was over here for a while, 4 weeks I think. And then we've got 3 general operatives. They do all the maintenance work and all the hard work. They're the engine of the national park really. And then we've got 4 information and education guides. So what? So the main habitats within the park, limestone pavement and orchid-rich calcareous grassland, and they're in a mosaic, and they're the bulk of the habitats we have in the park. We also have woodlands, which are mostly hazel woodlands, hazel and ash woodlands, but we do have Scots pine and holly and oak, a few other bigger trees as well. But the majority is ash hazel woodland, juniper, lowland hay meadows as well. I'll go into a few of these in more detail as to what we do within the park. So this is an example of some of the limestone pavements. The pavement itself is very varied depending on what area you're in. So you can see we've got areas that are very solid, clints and grikes, and very kind of uniform like that. And then we've got other areas like up around here or in here where it's more shattered limestone pavement, which is all just as important. So the pavement itself can be quite varied depending on what area you're in, what level you're at. The pavement is nearly always in a mosaic with other habitats, so mostly grasslands. We've got different types of grasslands, from kind of neutral to calcareous grasslands, and it's very hard to put them into a box because they change constantly as you walk through it. So this area is quite a strong bit of grassland up here, which means that it's less species rich than some other areas. It's also badly undergrazed. This is the national park on this side. This is privately owned on this side. And if you actually stand on the wall and you look one side, it's nice, really short grass, and on the other side, it's undergrazed. And that's one of the issues that we have to try and manage and try and overcome. Our grazing levels are not appropriate in some places. And this is some of the grasslands that you get within the pavement areas in the mosaic. Some plants just growing straight out of the limestone, out of the rock itself. Some have a little niche, little community within the breaks and within the limestone, and then other areas of grassland. That's actually on a roadside verge, but a slightly deeper soil with a bit of shelter, and you'll get more grasses and plants like that. This is one of our meadows that we manage as a hay meadow. We used to take a cut of hay off this, but thanks to the Burren Life Programme, Burren Farm Conservation, they did forage analysis on it and realised that we were exporting too much nutrients from the site by taking a cut of hay off it. So what we have done for the last 10 years, I'd say, is we just graze it starting late August or early September, depending on the weather, and then it's grazed all through the winter time. But we do need to go back to maybe on a rotation every couple of years. We'll take a cut of hay off it. One of the issues when we don't take a cut off it is things like bracken starting to spread in, and with small willows and blackthorns and things as well. So if we're not taking a cut of hay off it, they don't get cut. So we have to come back in and treat them separately. So the bracken at the moment, we have a few trial areas going on of how to treat it, breaking it by hand or whacking it with sticks. And we've just bought a bracken bruiser for a quad. We've only just started to have kind of machinery and stuff like that. So before then it was all by hand. So we're in the process of just doing a couple of trials just to see which will work best, and which is most practical as well, because we don't have huge staffing numbers. As you can see, it's really diverse. It's a huge variety of species going through that, and that's all through the summer. It can be like that. This is one of our woodlands. This one you can see is Scots pine there. It's actually not Scots pine. It's Burren pine, which is what we're calling it now. They did pollen analysis on core samples in local lakes, and they've done DNA analysis as well. And it's genetically different enough from Scots pine that we can say it's always been at this site, and it actually didn't die out in Ireland. So it's being called the Burren pine. And what they actually discovered was pine was in Ireland before it was in Scotland, and then it moved from Ireland to Scotland, and then it died out in Ireland and Scotland. Or we thought it had died out in Ireland, but this particular spot, it didn't die out in. So these are native Irish pine trees. So it's a really important habitat, and we've got a woodland management plan due to be finalised in the next couple of months. And one of the things which we think will come out of it is that the Scots pine is only regenerating in the open areas. So where we've got the hazel coming in, it's shading out the regeneration of the pine. So I think we're going to have to clear some of the hazel from around it. But as you can see, they're all really stunted because growing on the limestone. So when they're actually grown on other deeper soils, they grow normally like a Scots pine would. We've got lots of turloughs in the national park. A turlough is a lake which it doesn't have any overground rivers in or out of it. It's fed from subterranean, from aquifers or from subterranean rivers. So when there's heavy rain, these fill up, and then in dry weather they dry out again, which is usually the summertime. This is the same place, so that's winter and summer. It's looking like this at the moment because we've had such a dry couple of months. So very unusual, but the levels are very low. So all the vegetation that grows within the lake, within the flood zone of the turlough, has to have adapted to be able to survive intermittent flooding different times of year. We don't have to do much management wise with those. We are doing some vegetation surveys. There's been a few of them done, contracted out over the last 7 or 8 years, but we're actually doing some ourselves now. So diving and pulling up the charophytes and different plants and just getting a baseline of the vegetation within the lakes. They're extremely nutrient poor, so they're really clean lakes, like they're crystal clear. There's plants growing at 10 meters down. There's plenty of light there for them, so extremely unusual habitat. So this is the main chunk of the park, and we have it divided up. So when the land was bought for the national park, grazing was offered back to the landowners that it was bought off, and any of the landowners that wanted to keep the grazing, we enter into a grazing agreement with them. So each of these areas has a different grazing agreement. It's predominantly cattle grazed, and there's a few horses in some places, and it's predominantly winter grazed as well. We have some summer grazing over the lowland areas and around by the Turlocks, but most of the park is grazed in the winter time. So come the beginning of May, the cattle are off the winterage, and you've got really short grass coming into the spring, into the flowering season, and then it's just left without grazing through the summer, and then the cattle will be put on any time from September through to the end of April, and that's the system that there's always been in the Burren. Well, it's an adaptation of the system. There are some happy cows up on the top of the hill in the winter time. The reason why, traditionally, the reason why it was grazed in this time, winter time, was because in the summer the springs up in the mountains dry up, and the lowlands are quite often flooded. The grass also has quite a long growing season because of the heat from the rock. And oh, I'm forgetting something.
Dry line.
What?
The dry line.
Well, yeah, they're out, they're healthy. They're lying on all sorts of grasses and eating all sorts of really diverse vegetation and stuff like that. So they're actually really healthy when they're out. And farmers find that calving is really good because they're fit and healthy. They're not getting diseases and stuff by stuck in a shed with all the other cattle and stuff like that as well. And this is just a few of the pretty flowers that we get because of the winter grazing. So these are early purple orchids. They're all out at the moment. You can see them with the primroses. With some birdsfoot trefoil, spring gentian, and then this top one is the seed plant of the mountain avens. Seed head. So an Arctic alpine plant, not in the Arctic or the Alpine, which is interesting. So one of our other management issues is obviously invasive species. Not necessarily alien invasive, but invasive nonetheless. Because limestone pavement and orchid-rich calcareous grassland are priority habitats in the Habitats Directive, we have to protect them and maintain those habitats. So as you can see here, the hazel, which is not a qualifying interest for the special area conservation, but the hazel, you can see it's just taking off. You can see it dotted all over the hill here. So if we leave that for another 10 years, that grassland will have been gone. It'd be very hard to get it back. So by clearing the hazel and treating the stumps and treating the regrowth again afterwards, we're trying to, within the park anyway, we're trying to maintain these grasslands, keep them open. The natural climax vegetation would be woodland, but because it's in an SAC and the habitats are so unusual and rare, we're trying to maintain it. In other parts of the Burren, which is privately owned, it's very hard for the farmer to counteract this. So Sharon will be talking a little bit, I think, about with the Burren Life Scheme that they set up, how that helps the farmers to try and do something about it. Cotoneaster, it's not a big problem for us in the park. We had a small area, but there are areas outside of the national park which have a big Cotoneaster problem as well. Within the park, we've managed to kind of contain it. we've been doing it for 15 years and we still get little sprouts sticking up every year, but it's very easy to contain it at that stage. Hyraceum, it's a headache for Helen and myself. There's a non-native species which is starting to take over in one area. And we've done a few tests, and the only thing that works is to wipe it with Roundup, but it's in a really public area, so we don't really want to do that. So we're trying to figure out what to do with it. Helen's been out with her scissors trying to get rid of the seed heads before they produce seed. But I had a look at it the other day, and there's a couple of acres of it now, so I think it might be one we might have lost. And the same red valerian. It's debatable whether it's causing a negative problem or not, but it's also something within the park we've managed to be able to identify areas where it is and treat them, but every year that's getting harder and harder. There's so much seed. It is very good for pollinators, so there's definitely an argument for let it be. And it's generally found in the rocky areas, so the question is it taking over from any other species, or is it just existing in a niche on its own? So that's debatable. We've had discussions with Sharon about it plenty of times, but in some areas of the Burren, you'll see acres and acres and acres of just pink, and it's very pretty, but it's not traditionally a local plant. Himalayan balsam, we just had one patch of that near a garden, and it was very easy to treat, so we just pulled it up, and that's gone, so that's very easy. But we're constantly keeping an eye out for invasive species. So just with the hazel, I touched on it briefly. That same area the picture was, so this was all little hazel bushes. So we cut them as low to the ground as possible, treat them with Roundup and glyphosate, and then we come back the following year or 2 years later is actually a better kill on it. So if you leave it for 2 years and come back and then wipe I think I have it there. That's an example of it where it was cut and treated, but not all of it. Just the nature of the hazel, you might not have got every stump, or it might not have taken in enough of the chemical, so it starts to regrow. So we'll come back and we'll wipe the leaves of that. What we've tended to use in the last few years is just a sponge cable tied to the end of a stick, and that gives us the best kill, the most targeted kill, I should say. We found that when we use little hand sprays and stuff, you'd have this ring of collateral damage around it, which we're trying to avoid for all sorts of reasons. But the wiping on seems to work quite well. It's a little bit slower, but it's very targeted. Then within the park, we've got a number of walking trails. I think we've got 7 or 8 walking trails in the park. The reason we only put them in about 15 years ago, and the reason was people were walking across private land and they were wandering all over the place. So, and when they go up the mountain, when they'd start to come down, they'd get to the top of a cliff and they'd scramble down it instead of walking back up to go around it. So just to guide people, keep them in places we want them to be and away from the more dangerous areas. We try to make them as low impact as possible. So we try not to put down any hardcore where possible. We're lucky that it's such a robust landscape from that point of view. You know, it's not peaty, it's not going to get washed away. But there is an impact from people walking. And a couple of years ago, we did actually put down some gravel in a few areas, but a very light skim of gravel, you'd hardly even notice it. And our signage is very minimal as well. This is our signage most of the way. In some places we've got limestone posts, but most of it is glued onto, those are actually screwed on, the original ones, but more recently we just use number nails and just screw them on, or just glue them onto the rock. So the theory is that it can all be reversed. We can take them off and in time it can disappear if we wanted it to. The actual path here, the people are just off at the path, just runs along here, so it's not too bad. It's not too obvious. I mentioned the visitor guides earlier. So what they do is we've got an information centre in Carfin, in a local village. So it's not actually in the park, but it's near the park. And we're hoping we've got planning permission to build a bigger visitor centre there, which will have an education centre as well involved with it. They do guided walks. a couple of times a week. They do art with nature, both for adults and for kids as well. They do school groups, university groups. They go out to schools and do an outreach program as well. And all sorts of other walks like bat walks and dog chores. They've been restricted right up to this year with just staffing numbers. They've been really stuck in the visitor centre because they haven't had the numbers that they can actually go out and do outreach and things like that. But they've got a few more staff now, so hopefully in the next year we'll get the outreach program going. And they've just got a festival van as well, which they're delighted with. It means we can bring the van out into the national park because the national park doesn't have any focal point. So to have a van there with information and presence on site is going to make a huge difference. So you can chat away to people. We have started. In the past we had quite a lot of cooperation with universities, and then for a good few years we didn't have very much because we didn't have a base. Our office in Carfin was moved into Ennis, so we couldn't really accommodate people. But now things have changed and we've got more scope. So we've a couple of bursary students we're going to take on this year from NUA Galway. Galway are also going to do a red squirrel survey and working on a project which is using goats for conservation purposes. So the old Irish goat has been used up in Dublin for control of gorse and for fire prevention, and they're going to start now down in the Burren and the National Park. They're going to take a number of areas and they're going to do a baseline survey and then use the goats to graze that area with radio collars for virtual fencing, and then do a whole analysis on the impact of goats and how practical or useful they'll be for grazing some of the rougher areas and keeping things like blackthorn down and hazel and things like that. And so that's only just starting off. We bought a farm and there's an old house in it, and there was some of the Irish black bee in the attic. So we're renovating the house, so we managed to get 2 hives out of that, and they've been taken off site to one of our GO's house, and we're going to bring them back when we've got the buildings sorted out. So NUIG are going to be doing some survey work and things with those 2 hives as well, which is quite interesting. And we've NUIG also have taken core samples from one of the turlocks, and they just an analysis last year was just looking at the timeline for species within the Burren, and they're going to start looking at pollen analysis and do a few more studies into that. We haven't tied it down exactly yet. And here's a few other surveys that we're doing. Spiders, I have that wrong. That's actually a guy called Miles. Bryophytes, a guy called Rory Hodd. He's just discovered a moss which he thinks is extremely rare. So he's sent it off to Edinburgh for DNA analysis, and he's also got a guy who's a Himalayan moss expert to have a look at it. So he's hoping it'll come back with something really interesting from that. So that's the first time it's ever been found in Ireland. If it is different, if it doesn't come back as just some variant or something. BSBI and the National Museum of Northern Ireland, they're both coming down at different times to do it's a training weekend for them, but they're going to do species analysis in certain areas of the park, and they'll pass that detailed information on to us afterwards. Ourselves, we do peregrine falcon surveys within the national park, lesser horseshoe bats, marsh fritillaries. We just found a big colony of marsh fritillaries in a farm that we just bought a year ago, so that's in the park. So that's really exciting. Bumblebee survey, which actually I started doing with Sharon, but I think I did it once and Sharon has kept it going. So that's Sharon's survey.
13 years later.
Yeah, I did it once. I think Sharon realised I know nothing about bees, so there's no point in me being there. So Eamon is doing quite a lot of rare plant surveys within the park. Even when he wasn't a ranger, he only started as a ranger in the park a couple of years ago. He was a ranger in Galway before that, and he was a guide in the park even before that. So ever since he was a guide, he's been doing a couple of surveys within the park. So he's continuing them and expanding them. So there's a great data set there. Badger set surveys. Last 2 years ago, we radio tagged 3 cuckoos. So 2 of them were a success. One of them, the radio tracking stopped fairly quickly, so we don't know what happened. But 2 of them have gone all the way down to Africa, and they're on their way back. They're nearly back again this year. So it's really cool to have that information. And that's all.